All right. Well, back when I played Dungeons and Dragons, started to play back in the early 80s, one character that was played by a friend of mine who also played the Deep Gnome character, he also had a Drow, and that was how he pronounced it, so that's how I've always pronounced it. I didn't adventure with this character very much that my friend played. I did one time, and he was Drow, and he was kind of mean. In fact, I think he would kind of bully the rest of us. The guy was 4 years older than we were, and he used to be like that. So the Drow, also known as the Dark Elves, are a subrace of elves most different from their cousins, and they've adapted to life under the ground in the same tunnels and cave complexes that the Grey Dwarves and Deep Gnomes call home. Drow are noted for their chaotic evil natures and cruel dispositions, although of course player characters need not follow these guidelines. So normally the Drow would be something you would find, I think, in the Fiend Folio is where the Drow were initially written up. And we didn't really have guidelines for playing races like this, but I kind of thought it was only my group that was doing something like that, but evidently others did too. So here we have some great guidelines in Adventures Dark and Deep of how to play a Drow with your group. The Drow are unique in that females of the race have abilities and powers that differ from those possessed by males. These differences are noted below and in the various tables regarding player character races. Although the Drow are known to possess specially enhanced accoutrements such as special cloaks and armors and poisons, player character Drow will not necessarily have access to these things unless the game master specifically allows it, and if it is appropriate to the campaign. Drows are generally universally reviled, and unless the campaign is especially an unusual one, the Drow player character will find himself the object of hostility in most civilized locales. Drow receive a bonus of +1 to their dexterity score and a penalty of -1 to their constitution, and it lists their minimum and maximum ranges. So it notes here that when you look in the bestiary, you'll see that the Drow have an innate magic resistance, but player character Drow do not have this same magic resistance because it's assumed that their continued exposure to the weird energies of the underworld are somewhat weakened as player characters because they're wandering the world and going to different places and sort of outside of that environment for longer periods of time. All Drow gain a +2 on their saving throw versus magic, by virtue of their race innate familiarity with the magical arts, even among those who have not taken up the role of magic user. Drow are able to wield, and this is quite interesting, Drow are able to wield 2 single-handed weapons with no penalty. That's strong. When doing so, they are unable to use a shield, a bow, a polearm, or other weapon that requires 2 hands, but they can choose to use a spiked buckler if they desire. Drow have an infravision of up to 120 feet and can see heat sources in darkened conditions. Because they've dwelt their whole lives in the underground environment, Drow are able to detect features relating to stonework and underground and other underground features such as sloping passages, new construction, shifting walls, detecting pit traps, and falling blocks. There are different percentages listed here. It's not automatic. I think we probably discussed this maybe with the dwarves, possibly some of the gnomes. They need to actually spin around and concentrate and actively look for this to be able to detect these things. Female drow are especially lithe and athletic and have a base movement of 150 feet per round, while males have the standard base of 120 feet. Drow get a +1 bonus on all surprise rolls. All drow may cast the following spells once per day as an innate ability. They don't need to memorize these spells, and they do not need access to prayer or spell books to do so. Dancing lights, fairy fire, and darkness at a 5-foot radius. At 4th level, no matter what class they are, they can cast detect magic, know alignment, and levitate once per day. Females, upon reaching 4th level, are also able to cast clairvoyance, detect lie, and the reverse, suggestion, and dispel magic also once per day. As a result of their generations-long lack of exposure to sunlight and the surface in general, some of the special abilities of the drow are lost or modified when they're in full sunlight or when they're around spells such as continual light. They suffer the following penalties. Their dexterity score is reduced by 2. When attacking, they receive a -2 penalty to hit. Enemies get a +2 on saving throws from drow attacks when it's appropriate. When the drow are in near or total darkness, but the enemies are illuminated by a strong light source, such as sunlight or continual light, they receive a penalty, but it's a little bit less. They receive a -1 to hit, and their enemies get a +1 bonus on their saving throw. Now, this is kind of important so far in my reading. When it is dim illumination, such as torches, candles, lanterns, or a light spell, it does not adversely affect drow. And that's interesting because back when I remember playing with a drow character back in the 80s, before we had guidelines like this, my friend was playing a magic user of some type, probably a multi-class, and he wanted to cast the light spell because we were heading into a dark area. And the drow guy immediately canceled it by casting darkness. And my friend was so ticked because back in those days, that's a memorized spell and it was burned for the day. But according to these guidelines, that light spell would not have adversely affected the drow. But I guess I don't know if it was just to bully him or whatever, but he wanted to cancel that effect because I don't remember my friend or the other guy who was playing the drow. I don't remember him ever really facing any penalties due to light. I just think as a drow, he just kind of hated the light and wanted to cancel it. Drow speak Elvish, Gnomish, Undercommon, and the Common Tongue, and they may learn additional languages as indicated by their intelligence ability score. So this probably follows the standard models of learning new languages. In addition, they all know something called the silent tongue, which does not count against their language limit. I believe this may be the sign language or something of the drow. The drow have skin of jet black hue, their hair is white or silver in color, and their eyes are, as a rule, violet, and the height and weight are determined as follows. Well, let's take a look at half-elves. As their name implies, half-elves can trace their parentage to both elvish and human stock. Whether the elvish side is of gray, high, valley, or wood stock is irrelevant. All half-elves except half-drow have the same abilities and restrictions. So we're going to get into half-drow a little bit later. We have their minimum and maximum scores listed, and it says characters that do not possess the right numbers can't qualify to be a half-elf. Characters of half-elven stock have a limited immunity to sleep and charm type spells. So it's not 90%, it's only 30%. And this immunity doesn't extend around them, it's just for them personally. This immunity is in addition to any normal saving throws that might apply to the particular spell. Their infravision has a range of 60 feet. With regard to languages, the player of a half-elf character must choose between his parents. Either he will have the languages known to his elvish parent with the limitations on learning new ones, or he may learn languages as a human. Learning languages as a human, it would just be based solely on his intelligence score. The choice should be up to the player, unless the game master determines. And the player must choose, and this happens when the character is created, and it can't be changed later. So you're either a bit more dominant on the elf side or dominant on the human side. Half-elves inherit their elvish parents' ability to spot secret and concealed doors. Half-elves share the same class options as their elven parent. Half-elven characters may, at their option, become multi-classed characters. Thus, a half-wood elf can choose the same multi-class as a wood elf. Half-elves appear as smaller than normal humans with ears that tend toward points, and their height and weight is determined here. So here we have the half-drow. It is possible, and I've never played in a game with a half-drow or even heard of such a thing. It is possible for player characters to possess one parent of drow lineage. Such characters are rare for player characters as they do not possess most of the special abilities of their drow parentage. But they do possess their limitations. 2, there is a social stigma that such characters must endure both in the drow and surface societies. So they're just going to be disliked wherever they go. Still, for players interested in role-playing this challenge, it can be quite satisfying. It should be noted that half-drow player characters should, under no circumstances, begin the game with the special drow armor and cloaks. That has to be acquired during play. All half-drow have the magic saving throw bonuses of their drow parent. They get +2 on all saving throws versus spells, wands, staves, wands, and miscellaneous magic items, and so forth. Half-drow do not share the innate spell-like abilities of their drow parents, except as noted below. All half-drow do have 60 feet infravision, and they can detect secret and concealed doors as elves do. Half-drow are vulnerable to sunlight and other bright light, as are their drow parents. Within full sunlight or the effect of a light or continual light spell, their dexterity score is reduced by 2, and they receive a -1 penalty on 2 hit rolls. There's something very important that was right there that I want to point out. The drow themselves were not adversely affected by a light spell, but for some reason the half-drow are affected by both the light spell and the continual light spell. I don't know if this is intentional. I don't know why it's different. And I kind of wondered if the human half-drow would have been less vulnerable to being affected by the light. But in particular, my question here is about the light spell. Drows were not affected by light spell, just a regular light spell. But continual light, yes. Half-drow seem to get a penalty, even with the regular light spell. So that would be I would play it just as it is written, but I'm just curious about that, if that was intended to be that way. I just would have thought with more human in them, they might actually receive less of a penalty, but I wasn't sure. Just my thoughts. Okay, this does not apply within the area of dimmer light, such as that of a fire beetle, torches, and lanterns, or fairy fire spells. So, yeah, again, in the drow section, when it talked about dimmer light, it included the light spell in that category, but here it is separated. As with all demi-humans, half-drow are limited in how many levels they can attain, and the maximum depends upon their ability scores. So this continues on to talk about elf drow, and I never really thought about it, but there are hybrids of surface-dwelling elves and their evil subterranean cousins. Elf drow are hated by both their parent races. They in turn hate those societies which scorn them, and they're usually outcasts and drifters on the outskirts of civilizations. At times they will find sanctuary in assorted communities where elves are not prevalent, and they can sometimes make their way by dint of their own abilities and drive. Otherwise, as noted, the type of surface elf heritage possessed by the characters does not change any of the abilities or statistics. Elf drow hybrids get a +1 bonus to their initial dexterity and intelligence scores, so both dexterity and intelligence, -1 to strength and constitution. They must begin the game in the following ranges. Female elf drow can cast dancing lights once per day. Elf drow have dusky skin suggestive of the shadows and brown or blonde hair with prominent strands of white. Their ears bear the points of regular elves, and their hair turns white with age much sooner than that of regular elves. They age at the same rate as full-blooded drow, and here are some numbers. Now, we're still not done. What about human drow? While much like their elf drow cousins in many respects, human drow are more accepted in human society, although they still face the same stigma among full-blooded drow. Generally speaking, males are dominant, which is an inversion of the normal drow social order. Male human drow hybrids get a +1 to their strength and dexterity, and a -1 to intelligence and constitution. Females get a bonus of +1 to dexterity and a -1 to constitution. Has to fall within the following ranges. Female human drow can detect lie once per day. Human drow have a greater variety of skin and hair colors, although all tend toward duskier tones of skin, and they see their hair turn white in early adulthood. Their ears are slightly pointed, betraying their elven ancestry, and they age as their human parent, but they add 20 years to every age category. Height and weight are determined below. So very interesting stuff. Lots of different varieties to role play and enjoy.